Hi, I'm Tom. Welcome back to the Woodshop Nerdery. I released a video asking you all to help me decide which of these two thickness planers to keep. I said that I had room to keep only one and I was unsure which was the wisest decision. I want to thank all of you who responded. I got lots of great responses. It was just a lot of fun talking to you all in the chat and discussing the different features and factors about these two planers. And I'm very close to making a decision. I have one maintenance issue left, or one maintenance question left in regard to the feed motor. I'll cover that a little bit later. Now, I did forget to tell you all a few things. I'll correct those mistakes in this video. But first, let me cover the general feedback. By far, the largest number of you said I should keep the Shopsmith planer. Some of the reasoning behind that was that these planers are more rare, in that if I were to get rid of this planer and regret it, I could easily find at a low price a planer like this to replace it. However, if I got rid of the Shopsmith, it would be much more difficult to replace this planer if I were to regret it. Some of you, although a smaller number, did suggest to keep the Wen. Some of the reasoning was it's newer. It will probably, in the short term, be more reliable. It just might be wiser to keep the newer machine. And I don't disagree with that logic at all. Like I said, it's really a tough decision on which of these two to keep. Now, there was another group of people who said keep both. I wish I could keep both. It's really just a space issue. There was another faction of you all who said get rid of both and buy a industrial sized Grizzly. I think some of those folks chimed in who maybe haven't seen some of my other videos and understand that I'm working in a garage in which I also park two cars, especially now that we're below freezing at night. Okay, so let me tell you some of the things I forgot to tell you. One is I need a planer that's not only small and portable, but also less than 70 pounds. Why 70 pounds? Because I have to lift these things around. I cannot dedicate the floor space to a stand on which to put a planer. Some of you had suggested to turn this into a stationary planer, to get a stand for it and a motor. In fact, when I bought this planer, it was on a stand and it had a 3¼ horsepower Craftsman motor powering it. I took all that apart and converted it back into a Mark V mounted thickness planer because of the space issue. So those of you who suggested the DW735, that's a DeWalt thickness planer, and there were a lot of you who suggested that. I don't disagree with you at all. I think that that's a fantastic planer. The issue I have with that planer is it's spec'd out at 92 pounds. Could I lift that around one time when I had to, or could I call my wife in to help me one time when I had to? Sure, I could. But to put it on and off the bench, week to week, I just think that's too heavy. It's too much of a risk. So that's why I say I need to keep it under 70 pounds. This planer is spec'd out at 62 pounds. This planer is spec'd out at 64 pounds. So these are well within the range and I can move these around no problem. The other point of confusion I created is I said that the Shopsmith planer had no depth gauge and that the Wen thickness planer did. Many of you responded and said that your Shopsmith planer does have the thickness gauge on the front and that perhaps mine had been removed by a previous owner. Okay, so let me distinguish the nomenclature. I consider this a thickness gauge. So this tells you the overall thickness at which you're planing. What I mean by a depth gauge is this device here on the front of the planer, and there's a little ball bearing here, and when you slide the wood between the table and this ball bearing, there's a gauge indicator that goes up and down that tells you the depth of cut, meaning how much wood are you removing in that pass. That's in addition to the thickness gauge over here on the side. Okay, let's now talk about the feed motor. I discussed that there was a clicking sound when running the feed motor in the first video, and I asked you all to let me know if that was normal. The answer was no, that's not a normal sound. Many of you speculated that it could be the brushes, and there are two access screws here for the brushes. I'm going to take it apart. Some of you suggested just taking it apart, inspecting, and seeing if maybe they're misaligned, and that perhaps uninstalling and reinstalling could solve that problem. Okay, I also want to acknowledge those of you who said you felt that I was very lucky to own the Shopsmith and that you all were looking for a Shopsmith thickness planer for yourself, and you had to settle for a thickness planer like the Win or some other brand that was less expensive. I don't think anyone who owns a planer like this should feel bad. Like I said, I'm having trouble deciding between these two planers, partly because this planer does produce good results. Now, it is a 3-blade planer, and that's a point of confusion I'll clear up again here in a second. But my point is, I don't think anyone should feel bad or feel diminished by owning a planer like this just because you can't find a Shopsmith. I got lucky when I found this one. In fact, that's why I own this planer, is because I spent several years looking for one of these and I couldn't find one. There were others of you who looked up the model number for this Win thickness planer and looked at the price and said, well, that's a Win brand, it's a cheap junky brand, why didn't you buy a Porter cable or some other name brand planer? And they compared it to some DeWalt, the other DeWalt planer or Rigid or Porter cable or something. This is a 3-blade planer. Some of those other planers you all were referring me to that were cheaper or less expensive but with a better brand, those were 2-blade planers. And when you talk about a 3-blade planer under 70 pounds, you are looking at a very narrow set of options. That's why I went with this thickness planer. Okay, I'm going to get set up to inspect the feed motor, and I'll bring you guys in a little closer and we'll see what happens. For reference, again, here's the sound of the motor. Let's plug this motor back in. So yes, we still get the issue even with it disconnected from the rollers. All right, let's take a look at these brushes. Carefully. Okay. There's the cap. Spring. Not sure what I'm expecting to see, but I guess I sort of had thought that the brush would be attached to the end of the spring. Well, there's a lot of carbon there. So certainly don't know that I could call that worn out. Okay, number 2. I'm brushing away any sawdust or debris here. Not sure that I want anything falling down in there once I extract these. Okay, see there's a little more. Okay, was not as careful with that one. No, I don't think you're going to get the light. Okay. All right, let me reinstall. Okay, so there's obviously still the source of the clicking sound. The brushes are in really good condition. There's lots of carbon there. Even though it makes a weird noise, this motor's really strong. Outfeed, infeed on this is really strong. I'm going to call this acceptable. Could I take this motor all apart and see if there's another source to the clicking sound? I certainly could. And I do take things apart and try to fix them when they're broken. Because at that point, the risk of taking it apart and trying to fix it is pretty low. You have nothing to lose. It's already broken. You can't break it anymore. In this case, this is a functioning motor. I think that there's an equal chance that I could take this apart and ruin it totally, as is a chance of me taking this apart and actually repairing whatever clicking sound that is. So I'm deciding to live with that clicking sound. I'm deciding to keep this Shopsmith thickness planer as well. So I'm going to reinstall. So while I'm here, I might as well investigate the switch box. I said in the last video that someone had disabled the safety switch here. Since this is the Woodshop Nerdery, let's take a look inside, see what we got. I can at least do a little reconnaissance on what it might take to fix that. So let's go ahead and unplug. All right, let's see where we're at. Oh boy. Well, there might be some dust in here. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know what I'm missing. I honestly think there is something missing here. Just not sure what it would be. I think even if I bought a key, I'm not sure that it would prevent this from going up and down. So glad I took it apart before I went ahead and tried to source a key for it. Just don't think it's necessary. Maybe somebody else who has one of these will take it apart and share it with the community and show how that's actually locking, because I don't see it. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and turn the camera off, put everything back together. Okay, Shopsmith wins. This is the one I'm keeping. Thank you all for all your comments, advice, suggestions, questions. Again, I really enjoyed it. I hope you had fun too. I'll mention one more tip. These are the brackets that screw into the bottom of the thickness planer onto the weigh tubes to mount it to the Mark V. You cannot use this without some sort of mounting system, And I'm lucky enough that the original brackets are included with it. So that I keep track of them and they're always with the planer, I've gone ahead and taken some magnets and applied it to pretty much the only magnetic part on this machine, which is this steel front plate. And then I just use these steel screws to attach it. That's about the only way the magnet would work. But it's worked for me so far, and I haven't lost track of these yet. Okay, that's it for the video. Thanks for stopping by the Woodshop Nerdery, and I'll see you next time. Bye.